The heat over Kandahar was the kind that made the air hum. Dust shimmered above the ground, and the silence felt like something alive, a silence so fragile it begged to be broken. Sergeant Eva Rostova sat on an overturned ammo can outside the aid tent, field stripping her M4 with the precision of someone who'd done it too many times. Sweat rolled down her temple, tracing a thin line through the grime. Her face was calm, almost unreadable, but her hands trembled just enough to betray what the eyes tried to hide. From the MRAP nearby, Specialist Jessica Miller's voice cracked over the heat. "You think it can get any hotter, Sarge?" Rostova half smiled, not looking up. "If it does, even the devil's gonna ask for shade." The younger soldier laughed softly, but Rostova didn't join her. She just kept cleaning, one bolt, one spring, one memory at a time. The ritual kept the ghosts quiet. But quiet was good, and quiet never lasted in Kandahar. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to Military and Veteran Stories, where true heroes live on, and tell us in the comments, where are you watching from today? Evening in Kandahar had its own rhythm, a strange, uneasy calm that settled over the base once the sun dipped low enough to stop burning through skin. The dust turned gold in the light, floating like smoke through the narrow lanes between HESCO barriers. Every sound seemed louder in the quiet. The distant hum of generators, the lazy flap of a flag, the faraway murmur of the call to prayer drifting from a nearby village. Sergeant Eva Rostova sat outside her tent, her sleeves rolled up, her aid bag open beside her. 32, Army medic, daughter of a small-town nurse from Minnesota. She'd seen 3 deployments already, each one carving a little more silence into her. Calm under pressure, respected by everyone who'd served beside her, but not many claimed to know her. There was a line around her heart as clear as the one she'd drawn around her sleeping bag. Cross it, and you'd be politely turned away. A shadow fell across her pack. Specialist Jessica Miller plopped down beside her, holding 2 lukewarm water bottles. She was 20, barely out of high school, and still carried that Midwest sunshine in her smile. Ohio farm kid. Freckles, ponytail tucked under her cap, eyes bright with questions she hadn't learned not to ask yet. "Figured you'd forget to hydrate again," Miller said, handing one over. Rostova took it, unscrewed the cap, and nodded. "Figured you'd keep track." That was about as close to affection as it got. Miller glanced at the aid bag. "You really go through that thing every night?" "Every night," Rostova replied, checking a roll of gauze, flipping a hemostat open and closed. "You don't wait until you need something to find out it's not there." Miller smiled faintly. "Guess that's why they call you Ice Queen." Rostova didn't react, just sealed the bandage packet and said, "Better ice than ash." Across the compound, a group of soldiers from Alpha Company lounged against a Humvee, trading jokes as the heat broke. One of them, a lanky corporal, called out, "Hey Miller, you learning how to knit in there? Or is she teaching you the secret to not smiling for 6 months straight?" Laughter rippled through the group. Miller flushed, but tried to play it off. "Maybe she's teaching me how not to talk as much as you, Corporal." The men laughed harder, and even Rostova's lips curved, just barely. She didn't defend her rookie. She didn't have to. Miller had handled herself fine. When the others drifted away, Miller turned to her. "You ever get used to that? Teasing?" Rostova asked. "Sure. First it annoys you. Then it doesn't. Then you stop hearing it." Miller nodded thoughtfully. "Guess I'm still on step 1. "Good," Rostova said quietly. "Means you still care." For a long time, they sat in companionable silence. The sun finally sank behind the hills, turning the mountains into jagged silhouettes. Somewhere in the distance, a convoy's engines roared to life, soldiers heading out on another patrol. Rostova listened with that same quiet intensity she carried everywhere. She could read a situation from its silence, when quiet meant peace and when it meant something worse. A faint hiss of radio chatter broke through from the comms tent. Words half lost in static. Unconfirmed movement south of the village. Possible vehicle activity near checkpoint 4. Rostova's head tilted slightly, listening, her fingers pausing on the bandage she'd been folding. Miller caught it too. "You think it's something?" "Could be," Rostova murmured. "Could be nothing." She sealed her aid bag, tugged the zipper closed with finality. But in this place, nothing doesn't last long. Miller studied her for a moment, noticing how her eyes drifted toward the horizon, that faint tremor of memory that passed across her face when the word contact echoed through the radio static. She'd never asked about Rostova's past, about what happened on her last deployment, or why she still slept with her boots by the cot. She didn't have to. The base settled into darkness, broken only by the faint blue glow of the TOC monitors. A guard walked the perimeter, the metallic click of his boots echoing like a metronome. Rostova finally stood, stretching the stiffness out of her back. "Get some rest, Miller. You're on standby tomorrow." "Yeah?" Miller asked, already sensing that tone, the one that meant something's coming. "Yeah," Rostova said softly, eyes still scanning the distant ridgeline. "War always comes back. It just waits until you start to breathe again." The first shout came through the radio like a gunshot. "Contact! VBIED at checkpoint 4. Then the voice dissolved into static, panic, overlapping calls for help, someone screaming coordinates that blurred together. In the aid tent, Sergeant Eva Rostova froze for only half a second. Then, instinct swallowed hesitation whole. Her rifle was already slung over her shoulder, aid bag snapped shut and hauled up by the strap. "Miller, gear up, we're rolling!" The younger soldier jumped from her chair, headset already halfway on. "QRF channel? QRF TAC. Now," Rostova barked, vaulting into the back of their MRAP. The quiet that had lingered over the base evaporated, replaced by a violent kind of purpose. Boots hit gravel, doors slammed, engines roared to life one by one. The motor pool became a storm. Miller climbed into the driver's seat, heart hammering in her chest. Her hand shook once, only once, before she tightened her grip on the wheel. "Convoy led, this is Guardian 2, moving to checkpoint 4. "Copy that, Guardian 2. "Confirm VBIE dead detonation. Possible secondary devices." The gate guard swung the barriers open. Rostova braced herself as the MRAP lurched forward, its heavy tires throwing up sheets of dust. The sound inside was a constant mechanical growl, the engine's deep churn mixing with the steady click-click of her gloved fingers checking her equipment by feel. "Massive hemorrhage, airway, respiration, circulation, hypothermia," she murmured under her breath. The medic's creed: stop the bleed, clear the breath, keep them alive. Every bump, every rattle of the armor felt louder. Outside, the Afghan countryside blurred by. Compounds of sun-baked mud, small children frozen in doorways, goats scattering from the road as the convoy thundered past. In the distance, a column of black smoke rose like a signal fire, twisting into the sky. Miller's throat was dry. She stole a glance in the side mirror. Other MRAPs followed close, guns scanning the ridgelines. "Sarge, if it's still hot when we get there?" Rostova's eyes didn't leave the horizon. "Then we run faster." The answer was simple, absolute. Miller swallowed hard, pressing her foot down a little more. The engine bellowed. They passed through the outskirts of a small village, faces turned toward them, unreadable, some curious, some grim. A boy held his little sister's hand and pointed toward the smoke. The closer they got, the thicker the air became. That faint, metallic tang that meant something terrible had already happened. The radio hissed again, words barely cutting through. "Multiple KIA, need medics, fire still active, sniper suspected on the ridge." Rostova keyed her mic. "Guardian 2 copies. En route. ETA 4 minutes. She checked her gloves, the straps on her pack, and then looked at Miller. "Stay behind the lead until we clear the outer cordon. You see movement on the ridge, you call it out." "Yes, ma'am. Don't ma'am me. It's Sarge." A nervous grin flickered across Miller's face, but it vanished when another explosion echoed, distant, smaller, but real. The MRAP shook slightly as the shockwave reached them. Rostova's jaw tightened. "That's secondary. They're targeting the responders." Eyes sharp. The convoy sped up, engines screaming. Every second now felt like a countdown. Through the front viewport, Miller caught the first sight of the checkpoint. It wasn't a checkpoint anymore. It was a crater surrounded by burning wrecks and scattered debris. "Jesus," she whispered. "Eyes up," Rostova said sharply. "Keep it steady." As they neared the outer perimeter, the radio came alive with chaos. Overlapping call signs, voices cursing, someone shouting for a medic. Rostova grabbed the handle above her head as the MRAP jolted over uneven ground. "Get as close as you can. Ramp down on my mark." The air outside was a living thing, heat, smoke, and noise colliding in a blur. Machine gun fire cracked somewhere up the hill, then went silent again. The smell of burning diesel and blood hit like a slap. "Ramp!" Rostova yelled. The rear door slammed open. She jumped before it hit the ground, boots crunching into dust and glass. The world ahead was a nightmare of twisted metal and scorched earth. Miller stayed in the driver's seat, hands gripping the wheel, headset pressed tight as she listened to the chaos on the net. "We've got wounded on the west flank, multiple amputations, sniper fire from the ridge. Get those medics moving." Rostova sprinted toward the nearest figure she could find, a soldier crawling, one leg trailing behind him. She dropped beside him, scanning quickly, arterial spray, partial detachment, shock setting in. She yanked a tourniquet free from her vest, tightening it high above the wound. "Stay with me, soldier. You're not dying here," he groaned, gripping her sleeve. "Williams, Lieutenant Williams, my guys, they're coming. Focus on breathing. You're going to be fine." Behind her, the MRAP's gunner rotated the turret, scanning the horizon for the sniper. Miller could see muzzle flashes, small bursts of light flickering from the hills. "Contact North Ridge," she shouted into the radio. The turret gun thundered in response, a deep, punishing rhythm that shook the ground. Brass shells clattered down the side of the vehicle like rain. Rostova barely noticed. She was already moving to the next casualty, 2 soldiers lying motionless near a burning truck. One was gone. The other still had a pulse. She rolled him over, checked his airway, cleared the blood from his mouth with her gloved fingers. "Miller, I need a line to medevac now. Already on it." Miller's voice came through the headset, steadier now, her fear replaced by focus. "Tell them we've got at least 4 critical, 1 urgent surgical, possible sniper still active." "Copy that, Sarge." Rostova's movements were a blur. Tourniquet, pressure dressing, airway kit. Every step automatic, mechanical, life-saving. The noise around her faded, replaced by the pulse of adrenaline and the sound of breathing that wasn't hers. Another crack from the ridge, closer this time. A bullet hit the dirt inches from her boot, kicking up a spray of sand. She didn't move, just shielded the wounded man with her own body as she worked. Miller saw it all from the turret camera, her sergeant kneeling in open ground, bullets snapping past her head, refusing to leave the casualty. Something in her chest snapped. Fear, maybe, or pride. And she slammed her hand on the radio trigger. "I got you, Sarge!" The 40 cal roared to life again, long, deafening bursts lighting up the ridge. The recoil rattled the whole map, but she didn't care. Every tracer she sent into the hillside was a promise. Under that cover fire, Rostova finished stabilizing the wounded soldier. She signaled 2 nearby troops to help carry him. Together, they hauled him back toward the MRAP, stumbling over craters and wreckage. Her uniform was streaked with blood, half of it not her own. Her voice was hoarse when she shouted over the engine noise. "Keep him breathing! Don't let him go quiet!" Miller swung the turret to sweep the other flank. The smoke was thicker now, rolling through the broken checkpoint like a living shadow. Somewhere behind it, the dull whump of another secondary explosion rattled the ground. "Convoy led, this is Guardian 2, we have wounded secured, medevac inbound." Miller's voice cut through the net. "Sniper fire suppressed, but we're still taking sporadic rounds." The reply came broken and harsh. "Copy that. Hold position until birds in range. We're sending reinforcements from Walton." Rostova looked back at the ridge. Nothing but smoke and dust. For now, silence. But the kind that never lasted. She knelt beside Lieutenant Williams again, pressed her fingers to his neck. Pulse weak, but there. "Stay with me, sir. You're going home." He blinked, groaned softly, and tried to speak. "Don't waste it on words," she said gently. "You've done enough." For a fleeting moment, Miller looked over her shoulder through the cracked viewport and met Rostova's eyes. No words between them. Just the shared realization that they were both exactly where they were meant to be. The air shimmered with heat and gunpowder. The radial hissed again, faint but clear. "Guardian 2, medevac, inbound in 8 mics." "Hold that line." Rostova took a slow breath, gripping the tourniquet one last time to make sure it held. Her knuckles were white. She exhaled through her teeth and muttered, 8 minutes. "We can hold 8. And as the smoke of Kandahar curled upward, the quiet that followed wasn't peace. It was only the war catching its breath. Checkpoint 4 didn't look like a battlefield. It looked like the end of the world. When the convoy crested the last ridge, the scene below froze every breath in the vehicle. ESCO barriers lay shredded like paper, twisted rebar jutting into the air. Burning vehicles spat black smoke into the sky. The dirt road that once led through the checkpoint was now a crater, littered with broken rifles, melted radios, and pieces of uniforms that shouldn't be alone. Rostova didn't wait for the ramp to lower. She was already moving. Boots hit the dirt before the others even processed the sight. The air was thick, part smoke, part blood, part dust, clinging to the back of her throat like iron. The soundscape was chaos incarnate. The crackle of fire, the pop of heated metal, the low moan of a wounded man somewhere just beyond the wreckage, and the faint, haunting echo of gunfire from the distant ridge. She ran toward the sound of the cry. "Medic! Over here!" Her vision tunneled as she vaulted a broken section of barrier. Through the haze, she found him. Lieutenant Williams, the checkpoint commander, sprawled near what was left of his Humvee. His left leg was a ruin, shredded by shrapnel, uniform soaked in red mud. He was conscious, eyes wide and unfocused, one hand gripping the dirt as if it could anchor him to life. When he saw her, his voice was ragged but firm. "Leave me! Get the others!" Rostova dropped to her knees beside him, pulling a tourniquet from her vest with one sharp motion. "Not my kind of order, sir." She cinched the strap high on his thigh, twisting until the bleeding slowed, then stopped. The whole time, her movements were mechanical, calm, sure, efficient. Her face was streaked with soot, but her voice never rose. "Miller, I need a line to medevac now," she shouted over her shoulder. "Copy that," came the reply from the MRAP. Miller's hands trembled as she keyed the mic. "Guardian 2 to TOC. We've got wounded. Repeat, multiple wounded, requesting immediate air evac." Rostova didn't hear the response. All she heard was the pulse in her ears, the distant hum of the helicopter rotors that weren't here yet, and the broken gasps of the man beneath her hands. Then, crack. The sound was sharp, precise, unmistakable. A sniper. The round hit somewhere behind her, punching into a smoking wreck with a metallic clang. Another shot followed, hitting closer. A puff of dirt sprayed against her boot. "Sniper!" "North Ridge!" someone yelled. Soldiers dove behind cover, rifles snapping up, scanning the horizon. But Rostova didn't move. Her world had narrowed to the space beneath her hands. The open wound, the trembling breath of the lieutenant, the feel of life slowly slipping through her gloves. She leaned closer, pressing gauze hard into the wound. "Stay with me, sir. You're not dying in this dust, not on my watch." Another crack, closer still. The dirt exploded inches from her knee. She shifted her body, placing herself between the lieutenant and the incoming fire, her helmet catching a glint of sunlight through the smoke. Her voice was low, almost steady. "Miller." "Covering fire. Now!" Miller's heart lurched when she saw it from the turret. Her sergeant, kneeling in the open, completely exposed, hands buried in a man's torn uniform, while tracer rounds cut through the air around her. The sight hit her harder than fear ever could. "Copy that," she screamed, swinging the heavy .50 caliber toward the ridge. The gun roared to life, a thunder that shook the desert. The first burst tore through the rocks above, spitting sparks and dust. The next raked across the hillside, sweeping for the sniper's nest. The whole sky seemed to flash orange as the tracers arced through the smoke. Rostova didn't look up. The chaos around her was background noise, fire, screaming, engines, bullets, all irrelevant. Her focus was the IV line she was threading into a vein slick with blood. Her gloved fingers trembled once, then steadied. "Come on, Lieutenant. You're going to feel a little pressure, that's all. Stay awake for me." Williams groaned, eyes fluttering. "You should have run, Sarge." She pressed down on his shoulder to keep him still. "I don't run. I fix." Another round cracked, this one hitting the MRAP's armor. The ping echoed through the vehicle like a hammer on a bell. Miller gritted her teeth and fired again, longer this time, the barrel glowing faintly red. Around them, other soldiers moved in bursts. Duck, rise, fire, drop, a dance between life and chaos. But all eyes kept drifting back to that single image. A medic in the open, smoke swirling around her, tracer lines cutting past her like comets. She looked like she belonged there, like she'd already made peace with it. The air was hot enough to blur vision. Sweat ran into her eyes, mixing with dust and blood. She blinked it away, finishing the IV tap with one final push. IV secure. Pulse weak but stable, she muttered to herself. Let's move him. Two nearby soldiers dashed forward under Miller's covering fire. Rostova directed them with quick gestures, one on the shoulders, one on the legs. Together, they lifted the lieutenant carefully, his face pale, his breath shallow. As they carried him back toward the MOPREP, Rostova walked backward, rifle up, eyes on the ridge. Every few seconds, she glanced down to make sure the IV stayed in place. Miller eased off the trigger for a breath. Smoke rolled over the checkpoint, swallowing the ridge in gray. The sniper fire ceased, or maybe the shooter had been silenced. For a heartbeat, the battlefield went eerily still again, broken only by the hiss of flames and the groan of collapsing metal. Rostova reached the MRAP and pounded on the side armor. "Ramp down!" "Let's go!" The ramp dropped. She climbed in with the others, dragging the lieutenant inside. His blood smeared across the steel floor, bright against the dull green paint. "Get him secured! Keep pressure here!" she ordered, handing off to another medic who'd arrived from the trailing vehicle. Then she leaned against the wall, chest heaving, wiping her face with a trembling hand. For a split second, she allowed herself to feel the tremor, the quiet after surviving what should have killed her. Outside, Miller's voice broke over the intercom. "Sarge, sniper's quiet." "Ridge looks clear." Rostova keyed her radio. "Good work, Miller." "Don't relax. He might be moving. Keep your eyes up." She glanced back at the lieutenant, pale but alive. She could see the faint rise and fall of his chest beneath the bandages. A life dragged back from the edge. For a medic, that was victory. She stared out the narrow viewport at the rising smoke, the broken checkpoint, the ghosts walking through the heat. Her voice was soft when she spoke, barely a whisper. "You hold the line until someone breaks. Today, it wasn't us." Outside, the flames roared louder, swallowing the horizon in fire. The sound of the .40 caliber tore across the valley like thunder rolling through metal. Every squeeze of Miller's trigger ripped open the air, deafening, heavy, endless. Spent brass casings poured down the MRAP side in a golden rain, clinking and bouncing off scorched sand. The barrel smoked, glowing a dull red in the fading light. The sniper fire stopped. Just stopped. 1 second it was there, sharp and surgical. The next, gone into the echo of its own silence. "Ceasefire!" Miller shouted, voice hoarse through the headset. The machine gun fell quiet, the world settling into that strange half-moment after violence when no one's sure if it's really over. Below, Sergeant Rostova was still moving. She and another soldier, a corporal with soot streaked across his helmet, dragged Lieutenant Williams across the debris field toward the MAPE. His blood left a broken trail behind them, like someone trying to mark a way home. "Slow, careful," Rostova panted, bracing her boots against the dirt. "Keep that leg elevated." "Don't let the pressure slip," Williams groaned, his voice cracked. Is it over? You're still breathing, sir." "That's what counts." When they reached the shadow of the MRAP, Rostova knelt beside him again, checked the pulse at his neck, and felt the faint flutter still there. She adjusted the IV line, sealed it tighter, and pressed a fresh dressing over the wound. "Pulse is holding," she muttered. "Miller, where's my bird?" Miller, still in the turret, checked the radio. "Command says, medevac inbound, 10 minutes out, Sarge." Rostova exhaled, staring toward the horizon where the smoke blurred into dusk. 10 minutes in Kandahar might as well be 10 hours. She stood, wiping her hands on her uniform, scanning the wreckage again. Bodies. Silence. But in the middle of the stillness, a sound, faint, muffled, almost human. "Hold on," she murmured. "Someone's still out there." The corporal beside her frowned. "Sarge, it's getting dark. Command said hold position. I said someone's still out there." Before he could argue, she was already moving, rifle slung, aid bag tight to her shoulder. The heat of the fires painted everything orange, the air thick with soot and diesel. Each step crunched over broken glass and fragments of armor. She passed what used to be a guard tower, now a heap of steel and sandbags. Beneath it, a voice, weak, Wheezing. Not English. She dropped to her knees, pushed aside a torn tarp. A young Afghan interpreter lay trapped under a collapsed barrier, one arm pinned, his chest rising shallowly. "Hey, hey, easy," she said softly, switching to basic Dari she'd picked up from months of joint patrols. "You're safe. I'm here." His eyes fluttered open, glassy with dust and pain. He whispered something that barely carried through the crackle of fire. "Friend, American friend." "That's right," she said, pulling a morphine injector from her pouch. "Friend." "Stay still. I've got you." She pushed debris off his legs, hands moving carefully to avoid making anything worse. Her glove brushed the heat of torn metal, but she didn't flinch. Her whole body ran on muscle memory now. No thought, no hesitation, just the rhythm of saving lives in hell. When she freed him, she checked his pulse, his pupils, then sealed a chest wound with a field dressing. "Miller, I've got one more survivor." Local interpreter, critical. "I need a stretcher team here, now." "Roger that, Sarge." "Sending two your way." The corporal arrived moments later with a pair of soldiers. They lifted the interpreter gently, careful not to jar his ribs. Rostova walked beside them, one hand steadying the IV, her other on his shoulder. "You hang on, brother," she murmured. "You did your job. We'll do ours." They reached the clearing just as the night began to settle in. The fire's glow turned the dust red, and above it all, the faint thump-thump-thump of helicopter rotors cut through the sky. "Medevac inbound, 3 clicks out," Miller called from the turret. Rostova dropped to one knee, pulling a flare from her vest. With a quick twist, she struck it. A burst of bright red light hissed into the smoky air. She waved it in slow arcs above her head, marking the landing zone. The sound grew louder. That distinct chop of blades slicing air, until the first glimmer of the Black Hawk's lights broke through the haze. The helicopter came in low, buffeted by heat and turbulence. Dust exploded outward in a storm around them, stinging eyes and skin. Soldiers threw up their arms, shielding their faces. The wind howled, whipping the flames into swirling ghosts. Rostova held her ground. She stood tall in the maelstrom, one hand raised, flare blazing against the night. The Blackhawk settled into the cratered road, side doors already open. Medics inside waved frantically. "Bring them in." "Let's go." Rostova and her team rushed forward, pushing through the dust cloud. The lieutenant was carried first, limp but breathing. She climbed halfway into the bird, shouting over the engine. "Tourniquets high on the left thigh. He's stable but low pressure." The flight medic nodded, pulling Williams inside. "We got him. Who else?" Rostova turned back to the stretcher team behind her. "Interpreter, gunshot chest, shallow breathing. Needs O2 and chest decompression kit as soon as you're clear." They loaded him next, careful and quick. The rotors screamed above them. Every word had to be shouted to exist. When both patients were secured, Rostova stepped back, shielding her face from the wind. The helicopter began to lift, kicking up a hurricane of dust and debris. Through the spinning chaos, she could just make out Williams raising a weak hand, maybe a wave, maybe reflex. She didn't wave back. She just watched until the lights disappeared into the night, until the sound faded to a distant heartbeat. Around her, the fires still burned, the wreckage still smoldered, but for the first time since the explosion, there was something like quiet. Miller climbed down from the turret, her cheeks streaked with sweat and ash. "Bird's clear, Sarge." Rostova nodded slowly, eyes still on the empty sky. "Good. Let's find the rest. No one gets left behind." The corporal beside her hesitated. "Sarge, we've already done what we can." She shook her head, her voice low but absolute. "We haven't done everything until they're all home." The fire crackled in the distance, a reminder, not of victory, but of what it always cost. And as the last echoes of the helicopter faded, Sergeant Eva Rostova turned back toward the ruins of Checkpoint 4, her silhouette half lit by fire, a single medic standing in the wreckage, unwilling to leave even one soul behind. The Black Hawk's rotors shredded the smoke into spiraling ghosts, kicking up sand and debris that stung every inch of exposed skin. The airfield at Checkpoint 4 was no longer a road. It was a storm of dirt and noise. Rostova ran alongside the stretcher crew, her gloved hand gripping the IV bag above Lieutenant Williams's chest, trying to keep the line from tangling in the chaos. The flight medics inside the helicopter reached down, their voices drowned by the blades. "We got him. Hand him up. Easy." "Watch the leg," Rostova yelled, her words stolen by the downdraft. Williams disappeared into the blur of movement, one soldier swallowed by the machine of survival. Then came the Afghan interpreter, still pale, still barely breathing, carried in on another stretcher. His arm slipped limp over the side as they hoisted him up. Rostova steadied it gently, murmuring something he couldn't hear. "Both loaded," one of the flight medics shouted from the door. "We've got room for one more. Come on, Sergeant." But Rostova shook her head, dust swirling around her. "Get them home. That's an order." The medic hesitated. "You're sure? The ridge is still hot. They go first." Her tone left no room for debate. She stepped back, waving the bird off, eyes locked on the faces inside. One last look at Williams, strapped in, unconscious but alive. Then she thumped twice on the side of the helicopter, the universal signal, "Go!" The pilot nodded and began to lift. The rotors screamed. The ground shook. The Black Hawk rose through the storm of its own making, disappearing into the smoke and fading daylight. Then, crack! A sniper's bullet tore through the haze, striking the dirt not 5 feet from Rostova's boots. Another snapped past her ear close enough that she could feel the air move. "Contact! Ridge!" a soldier shouted. Rostova dropped to one knee, scanning the hillside. The world was nothing but noise, gunfire echoing across the valley, tracer rounds cutting red lines through gray air. Miller's voice exploded over the comms. "I see him! North Ridge 30 degrees right of the wreck!" She swung the turret around before anyone could answer, the own 50 cal roaring to life again, a storm of fire and sound so powerful it drowned out everything else. The barrel flashed white-hot, the air rippling from the heat. Each burst lit the smoke in strobe light flashes, glimpses of soldiers ducking, flames twisting, debris caught mid-air. Rostova shielded her face from the dust, shouting into her mic, "Keep firing! Pin him down! He's not getting another shot!" Miller's voice cracked, raw and fierce. The sniper's next round went wild, ricocheting off a destroyed Humvee. Miller kept her finger down, the machine gun hammering the ridge until it went silent again. When the last shell casing clattered to the ground, the silence hit like recoil. A silence that didn't comfort. It hurt. The helicopter had vanished into the dark horizon, just a faint blinking light fading into the night sky. The dust began to settle around them, revealing what was left. The cratered road, the burning skeletons of vehicles, the haze of cordite hanging low like fog. Rostova stayed still for a moment, kneeling in the dirt, her breath uneven. Her gloves were torn, streaked with blood, some hers, most not. "Sarge, you good?" Miller called from the turret. Rostova looked up, eyes hollow but steady. She nodded once. "Yeah. Barrel temp?" Miller blinked, then glanced down at the smoking weapon. "Hotter than hell. Just like we left it." A pause. Then Rostova keyed the mic again. "Mount up. We're going home." Miller climbed out of the turret, sliding down the MRAP's side armor. Her boots hit the ground with a heavy thud. She looked around. The fires, the smoke, the twisted shapes that used to be a checkpoint. The orange light flickered across her face, turning her expression unreadable. Rostova started walking toward the MRAP, slow and deliberate. Miller fell in beside her. Neither spoke. Their footsteps crunched over gravel and glass, the only sound left in the world. Every few paces, a small explosion popped somewhere distant, fuel igniting, something collapsing. But neither flinched. They passed the spot where Williams had lain, the dirt still wet, the tourniquet still discarded beside it. Rostova's gaze lingered, then moved on. When they reached the vehicle, Miller leaned against the side armor, catching her breath. Rostova stood beside her, arms crossed, eyes still on the ridge. The firelight danced across their faces, one scarred by experience, the other hardened by it. No words, no need. only the wind moving through the wreckage, whispering through what was left. The night began to fall fully now, wrapping the valley in shadow. The smoke thinned, the fires dimmed, and for the first time since the explosion, there was no gunfire, no shouting, no orders, just that deep, aching silence. The kind of silence that doesn't mean peace. The kind that means survival. And in that silence, Sergeant Eva Rostova and Specialist Jessica Miller walked back toward their MRAP, their silhouettes swallowed by the orange glow, two soldiers bound not by rank or uniform, but by the kind of night you never forget. The aid station was quiet. Too quiet. Hours had passed since the explosions at Checkpoint 4, but the smell of smoke still clung to everything, uniforms, skin, even the sterile metal tables. Inside, fluorescent lights buzzed faintly, casting the room in pale blue-white. The hum of a generator was the only thing that sounded alive. Sergeant Eva Rostova sat alone at one of the tables, sleeves rolled up, hands moving automatically over her gear. Her medkit lay open in front of her, the same one that had seen the worst of the world that day. She scrubbed blood from the scissors, wiped dirt from the forceps, folded gauze with clinical precision. The ritual was always the same. Clean. Check. Repack. It was how she made the noise stop. Every item carried a story. The shears that had cut through Williams's pant leg. The half-empty roll of tape she'd used on the interpreter's chest seal. Each piece of equipment bore the echo of someone who'd either made it or hadn't. She paused once, staring at her own reflection in the metal of a hemostat. The face that looked back was older than the one that had deployed here months ago. The same lines, but deeper now. The eyes, the same color, but dimmer somehow. The door creaked open behind her. Specialist Jessica Miller stepped in, still in her dusty uniform, helmet under one arm. Her face was smeared with soot, her eyes red from exhaustion, but there was something different about them. Steadier, heavier. She didn't speak. She just walked over and placed a lukewarm bottle of water beside Rostova's hand. Then she sat down across from her. For a long time, they didn't say anything. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was the kind that came from shared understanding, a silence earned the hard way. Rostova twisted the cap, took a slow sip, then set the bottle down. Her gloves creaked softly as she flexed her hands. Finally, she looked up. "You did good, Miller." Miller blinked, caught off guard. "I just did what you told me to." Rostova shook her head. "No. You did more than that." Miller's throat tightened. She swallowed hard, staring at the table. "You didn't duck. You didn't even flinch out there. I saw it. You just stayed with him." Rostova gave a small, tired smirk. "That's the job." Miller nodded slowly, her fingers tracing the edge of her helmet. "Still, I don't think I'll ever forget it." "Good." Rostova's tone softened. "You shouldn't." The younger woman looked up, her expression caught between pride and disbelief. "I was scared, Sarge. I thought we were done when those rounds hit the dirt." "Everyone's scared," Rostova said quietly, folding a bandage with careful precision. "Difference is what you do after that." You kept firing. "You bought us time." Miller's eyes glistened, but she blinked the tears away quickly. "You too, Sarge." That pulled a small laugh out of Rostova, dry, brief, but real. "I'll drink to that, when we get the chance." Another long pause. This one softer, easier. The kind that comes when adrenaline fades and all that's left is humanity. Rostova reached over and tapped the edge of Miller's helmet gently. "Welcome to the club, soldier." Miller smiled faintly. "The club that never sleeps?" "The one that never forgets," Rostova corrected. Outside, the night was giving way to morning. Through the narrow window above the workbench, the first hint of dawn stretched across the mountains, soft streaks of gold and rose bleeding into the gray. The base was starting to wake again. A distant convoy rumbled to life. The smell of diesel mixed with the faint aroma of instant coffee. Miller stood first, adjusting her gear, her movements slower now, heavier with the weight of understanding. She hesitated at the door. "You gonna get some rest?" Rostova looked down at her hands, still cleaning the last pair of trauma shears. Eventually, Miller gave a small nod. Yeah. Me too. She turned and left, the door closing softly behind her. Rostova sat in the glow of the fluorescent light, hands still for the first time in hours. Then, without realizing it, she exhaled. Long. Shaky. Human. Outside, the dawn brightened, spilling light over the jagged hills. The war wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The radio would scream again someday, maybe tomorrow, maybe tonight. But for this small, fleeting moment, they had earned the sunrise. The air outside was cold enough to bite, the kind of chill that came only before dawn in Kandahar. The fires from Checkpoint 4 had burned out hours ago, leaving behind nothing but smoke curling into a sky the color of ash. Sergeant Eva Rostova stepped out from the aid station and into the pale quiet. The world was still, no alarms, no shouting, no engines. Just the slow hum of the waking base and the whisper of wind over sand. She stood there for a moment, hands in her pockets, watching as the horizon began to glow, faint orange first, then gold, spilling across the mountains in thin, fragile light. The sun climbed slowly, washing over the ruined landscape, over the twisted barriers and burned-out vehicles, over everything that had been chaos hours before. Her shoulders loosened as the warmth touched her face. The ghosts were quieter now. Not gone. They never were, but quieter. In the silence, a voice seemed to echo in her mind, soft and steady, like a memory carried on the wind. They don't write songs about medics. They don't build statues for the ones who patch the holes and carry the weight. But sometimes, courage isn't loud. Sometimes, it just breathes, one heartbeat at a time. Behind her, Specialist Jessica Miller sat inside the MRAP-He, hands resting on the MRAP-He cal handle, helmet off, eyes fixed on the woman standing in the dawn. She didn't speak, didn't need to. She lifted her hand to her forehead in a quiet salute, not the kind from training manuals, but the kind that meant something real. Respect. Latitude. Understanding. Rostova didn't turn around. She didn't have to. She felt it. The bond forged in the noise and silence of war. The sun broke fully over the horizon then, blinding and beautiful, flooding everything with light. And for one fleeting heartbeat in Kandahar, the world wasn't made of fire or blood, just light, dust, and two soldiers who had survived the night. If you were moved by Sergeant Eva Rostova's courage, salute her in the comments below. She wasn't chasing medals or glory. She was saving lives, one heartbeat at a time. And remember, not every hero wears rank or stands on a stage. Some serve quietly, far from cameras and songs, doing what needs to be done so others can come home. Quiet heroes walk among us every day. Subscribe to military and veteran stories so their bravery and their sacrifice are never forgotten.